Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to some and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. What's going on now with shaking? Well, first, let me tell y'all that Wednesday, but y'all will hear this Tuesday. I think you'll first hear it on Tuesday, but Wednesday, when I leave work, I got to go straight to the airport and catch a flight back to my old city. And that's going to be a while because I got to go through Riyadh and then got to go visit my wife and my girlfriend. And so if I do record anything over next week, it's probably going to be short. By the way, I'll ask you all's advice. Do you think I should let my wife and my girlfriend know about each other? Now, to those of you that are new to my channel, I know it's Ramadan. Don't say anything. Just ask one of the veteran members or subscribers about the inside joke before you are up in arms. It's an inside joke. They know it. They get it. So anyway, getting to the topic of this, I stated what things were like on the Gulf Coast and how I grew up and what I learned and all that. And I figured that what I should do is probably give you all clips, images of Atlanta, how Atlanta changed, became ATL. I'm going to first tell y'all something about Atlanta. When I first finished high school, anybody that was going to move to Atlanta looked forward to it. It was a city with successful black folks, educated black folks. Everybody that knew about me going thought my future was bright. Everyone. To be honest with you, I thought it was at least going to be a decent future. I thought at least that much. But what I had to come to understand was over years, I had to realize that it was all not worth it. But that happened. It took time to realize that. I had to learn a lot of bitter lessons over the course of my time there. You all already know that when I came up on the Gulf Coast, the women were flighty, country, subject to delusions of grandeur and fleets of fancy, and that they were also hybristophilic, obsessed with things like whose butt you kicked, stuff like that. And the treatment was pretty bad for me until I began to fight. That lasted a few months because then it was time to move to Atlanta. And when I got to Atlanta, I again still looked the same, but with no history of violence. And too old for the violence at that point. I was 18, I was an adult going to college, wasn't supposed to be violent. We're beyond that age. But I looked like someone that had never been violent. And that bothered sisters if they thought I was checking for them. Spelmanites were fresh out of high school. Of course, the fresh women were fresh out of high school. So it was the same thing. They were, in fact, more mature, but I had to realize that they still had a problem with hyperscrutiny. They assumed the worst. They weren't doing this with everybody, but they were doing this with me, assuming the worst. There was nothing I could do. Began to date, went on a few dates with a young lady from Michigan. Now, I had learned in the Gulf Coast not to try to speak for other people. This lady said to me after phone conversations, "You only talk about yourself. You begin every sentence with I." Well, of course, there was a reason for that. How else would you know that I'm telling the truth? If I mentioned something about others, I could be lying. She also thought that I might be one of the guys that harassed a classmate of hers who was also the daughter of a nationwide celebrity. We had a few celebrities' kids that were going to Spelman and Morehouse. Khalid Abdul Muhammad's son went to Morehouse. Bill Cosby's daughter went to Spelman. Keisha Knight Pulliam went to Spelman, and there's some overlap in between our years. Sidney Bartholomew's son went to Morehouse. We're not classmates, but like I said, there's overlap between our years. Some of the time that I was at Morehouse, Sean King was there. I can recall seeing him on campus. First time I saw him on TV, he looked familiar. I said, I must know him from Atlanta. It must be. And when I heard that he was being called Talcum X, I said, nope, I saw him around black folks. If he actually is a truly white guy from both sides of his family, I honestly don't believe that he knew that for a long time. That's another talk for another day. Atlanta became, to me, a fresh start, and that was good. I didn't want to go back to my hometown for anything, but there was a problem. See, at that time, Atlanta was not violent. There was more money in Atlanta than in my hometown. So the crimes there had more to do with just people trying to get over, maybe eat. But people there were not that violent back in the 90s. It wasn't really a violent place. There was still, even among some of the crooks, there was still some sense of black solidarity. There was this sense of, you know what, if I'm going to hit someone, knock them over the head, I'm not going to do that to one of our own. Every time I heard about violence, it involved people that were not from Atlanta. And that was fine. But I was learning that the hyper scrutiny from the sisters that had followed me around in my hometown until I became violent and fought people was being applied to me again. And I realized this was something that at the time I thought, well, they must not be able to help it. They must really believe certain stereotypes and they can't change their minds about it. So maybe this is something that they can't change. I didn't really think of it as malicious. By the end of my freshman year, I had learned things I'd not heard before. I was part of a brotherhood because if you go to Morehouse, that in and of itself is a brotherhood. It's a frat, so to speak. I had learned a lot about international blackness. No longer did I accept the view, even from my peers, of blackness being an American phenomenon. Now, growing up, I had been told about international blackness, and I'd met a few black folks from other places in middle school. But now in college, I was always meeting them. Went for a job interview at a black-owned bank at that point. The lady interviewing me was from Caracas, Venezuela, but she was a sister. You meet people from all sorts of black countries, and they're proud to be black. And they're happy to meet black Americans that rock with them, to jive with them. I met Trinidadians, Ghanaians, and Liberians, and in that order, in terms of both chronologically and in terms of number. I met many FBA from New York and the rest of the northeastern coastline that were also Caribbean. Now, I met Nigerians too. And the ones that go to Morehouse, obviously, they do rock with us. They don't have a problem with us. They wouldn't go to Morehouse if they did. I also didn't meet that many of them in number. Met some Kenyans. From Spelman, I met some Angolans, some Namibians. My And Simba, if you're listening to this, fast forward 20 seconds. At the end of my freshman year, I stayed to work in Atlanta. And I got broken in by this Atlanta chick who was finishing high school. She was exactly a year behind me, but I realized that there was a vast difference in that year because I'd been to college, she had not. So psychologically, the difference was about like it would have been if I had been in high school dating a middle schooler. End of high school, dating a chick in middle school. It was about the same. I did not entertain a relationship with her because I realized what it was. I had to stop and think, well, I still have not accomplished. And I was actually judging certain things. I did not judge my humanity. I did not judge my worth as a human being by what kind of ladies I attracted, but I was still in that inward mindset of judging my worth as a mate by what kind of American sisters I could attract, or even what kind of sisters I could attract, period. I was still stuck in that mindset, and I didn't have exposure to any other, so I really can't blame myself for it. But pretty much I looked and I said, well, if a woman does not have any options, at least 2 or 3 amongst Western black folks, and then she's interested in me, that doesn't mean anything. That was an assumption I made. That summer, shortly after being broken in, I remember at my job, I worked with some family friends, and I remember asking Vanessa, listen, what is this thing with ladies wanting what other women have? I was like, I don't get it. And she said to me, well, this is Atlanta. And if a man is single, the women look and say, well, what's wrong with him? Why is he single? If he was a good man, he wouldn't be available. That's how we think. Because good men are rare in Atlanta. And I said to her, if they're rare, why is it that they're not being, no, she said available men, single men in Atlanta are rare. And I said, well, if they're rare, how is it that they have to stay single, even in Atlanta? And she said, it's just a bitterness that a lot of women learn. I had to eventually come to the realization that that this was not something that they couldn't help but think. It was something that they chose to think. But at the time, I thought it was something they could not help but think. I believed the propaganda, waiting to exhale. I believed it. I thought that's really what they were going through. And I even thought that there was some legitimacy to this notion of, a guy being a nerd and therefore being unattractive as an adult. I thought there was legitimacy to that. And I have to realize now, looking back, no, there's not really much of, not for those who are serious about moving forward with a life and a couple and a family and things like that. No, that's what you get. But I remembered her telling me this, and that stuck with me. And I remember my namesake friend telling me, well, when you're dealing with American sisters, it can be a problem, but you're dealing with the ones from Ethiopia, it's a little bit better. And I pretty much said, I'll consider that. Because I did know that they generally behaved better, even back then. We're talking, this is not even 2000 yet. Got a few years to go. By the time that summer job was over and I went to visit my parents for just, a few weeks before going back to start college again, I said to my mom, I thought about this. And after growing up pro-black and all of this, I hate to say this, but Mom, I'm not going to approach sisters. That's not going to happen. If that means I'm not going to be with a black woman, then so be it. But I'm not making approaches because it's not something they've earned. It's not something they deserved. And she said, well, do you think it's just because you don't know how to? And I said to her, no, it's because I now know that there's no right way to do it. I know this now. I suspected as much. And I wondered if I was wrong or just insane. But now I know there's not a right way to go about it. And I said to her, I have to look and see even when they're attracted to me, I have to look and see, well, what is it that they're missing? Now, I said to her, if I'm approached or if somebody comes to hook us up, I'll listen, see what it's about, see what she's about. But I don't make any more first moves, especially not with American sisters. I told her, don't worry, I don't like wired women. They're off the table. But maybe something else with some melanin. Told my dad too. Later, I went back, started my sophomore year, and I'd learned some pretty sad lessons, to be honest with you. Sophomore year, I went on a date with a chick from Baltimore. And it's funny because her last name was Lawyer. A date. And we went to Lenox and I was joking around about something. And she looked around nervously and said, "You're embarrassing me." And I thought, the hell, we were joking about something. I looked around trying to figure out why was she looking around. We didn't know anyone in the mall at the time. Nobody really seemed to even be paying attention to us. Then I looked down. We were going down the escalators, the ones that used to go by the California Pizza Kitchen. If it's still there, I don't know. We're going down those escalators. And I see this brother coming up there on the other side of the escalator with some locks. He looked at us and he shook his head and he looked back ahead of him. And I thought, well, I mean, do I know this dude? And it dawned on me. He thought he was looking at a mixed couple. Later on, when I hugged her, she said, "I can tell you're not a challenge." And I looked at her and said, "The hell do you mean?" I didn't understand what they were talking about when they would say this. They like a guy that's a challenge. And that's because I already knew that you had to have a backbone and a spine. I understood that. I mean, hell, I had seen how they treated me differently in my hometown after I started fighting. So when she said something about you're not a challenge, I realized she was looking. She didn't realize who she was dealing with. I never saw her again. We had a conversation on the phone, but I didn't even stay talking that long. She was talking crazy stuff like, "I just feel like I'm not supposed to be on this earth." And I was like, okay, I get the feeling sometimes when you're really going through something. But if you're going through something that's that bad, I got to be honest with you. I don't know how to walk somebody through it, especially without knowing what it is. And if it's that bad, it's probably not appropriate for me to get in your business like that. Never talked to Miss Lawyer again. Never did. Wasn't going to entertain it. Then I got busy with schoolwork. But the thing I began to notice is that, when I lived in my hometown, chicks in other cities would check for me. When I moved out to Atlanta, then chicks in my hometown would check for me. I started to say, this is up. I don't appreciate that. When the summer came, actually, let me tell you a little bit more about the sophomore year. In the sophomore year, it was very stressful, academically speaking. But I went to visit someone I knew at Spelman once. And I could tell that I was regarded with suspicion. Now, when I cross-registered as a freshman to take an education class at Spelman because I wanted to be a teacher, and I had to cross-register at Spelman to take the class, I remembered my mother saying, "You don't even want to be up at Spelman's campus that often, especially looking like you do, because all the women are going to say is, he's cute and he knows he's cute and he thinks he deserves better treatment. I'm going to show him. And your professors will think the same way and they'll grade you more harshly. Mark my words, son." And I believed my mother, and I still do. I don't think that particular professor was going to mark me more harshly or less harshly. What I think was that somebody was going to. And I would have had to cross register for a lot of my courses to take at Spelman if I was going to major in education and become a teacher. My mother also told me you don't want to be a teacher in America around this time. It's going to get worse in the next few years. She was right about that too. I should have gone into it, but I should have gone into it so I could teach here. But hindsight's 2020. So once I went to visit someone, I think to visit my Spelman sisters. But walking to and from where they lived, I got this cold shoulder and I stopped going on Spelman's campus. And I did not go back on Spelman's campus again until 2013 when I was making a food delivery working at a restaurant at nights because being a teacher was not paying the bills. I was a married man with kids at that point. And I remember when I drove up to the Spelman campus, for one, it was laid out differently, but the gate was in the same place. And I felt nervous. I felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. And I was making a food delivery. My senior year, I had a conversation with a family friend of mine. And he even said, "Wait, you don't remember where this particular part of the campus is?" I said, I remember that particular restaurant, but I don't remember exactly where. And I remember him saying, "Man, when did you go on Spelman's campus last?" And I told him it was 2 years ago. And he said, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, man." And I even asked him because he and I kind of looked alike. And I even said to him, "Listen, when you've been on the campus, have you ever been called by somebody else's name or blamed for something you have no idea who did? Or has anyone reacted to you like they knew you, but they didn't?" And he said, "No." I said, "Okay, cool. All right." And he asked if it happened to me, and I said, "Yeah." Because you see, I was thought to have been the guy that harassed the daughter of a celebrity once. I was thought to have been one of those guys. I wasn't. She didn't say that. It wasn't the daughter that said it. It was somebody else that knew her and knew me. I had explained to her, I don't know how this particular person looks. I mean, I heard she's going to the school because she's a celebrity, or because her dad is one, but I don't know how she looks. I can't harass her or bother her. If I've seen her, I don't know it. I hate to say this, but that's how bad it got, you know. I found out I was being mistaken for somebody else. I thought it was over by the time I got to be a junior. And then one day when I was a senior, this guy walked up and asked me how I did in this class that I never took. And I said, I know the professor, but I never took that class. And he was like, you were in the class with me? And I said, "That wasn't me, sir." "Ain't your name Jesse?" "No, it's not." I pulled out my ID and I showed another last name. I said, I don't know who this dude is, but apparently he got me into some trouble. What's his last name?" "Man, I never got it, but I know it wasn't this though." That's who the women have been treating me like all this time. But the thing was that the hyper scrutiny did not stop. And I was told in high school that when you get to college, they mature and they stop looking for the violence that they're looking for in high school. But when I got older, after years at Morehouse, I saw that that wasn't really changing. That wasn't the case. You see, they didn't want me to, nobody wanted me to be violent at that age. It wasn't that. But the assumption was that I could not, that I never was, and that I could not be violent if I needed to. And that led to all sorts of other assumptions that they were making. And I didn't know this at the time. I just knew something was off. To give one example, there was a fashion show and the announcer, this is back when Tommy Hilfiger was kind of new. The announcer mispronounced it Tommy Hilfiger. A few days later, I saw a Spelmanite lady that I knew. I spoke to her, how you doing? How's everything going? And a lady with her leaned over and whispered, girl, Tommy Hilfiger. The chick that didn't know me assumed that I was that announcer, even though we didn't even have the same voice. I was a light-skinned dude who let his hair grow long, and I looked innocent. And therefore, I must not know what Tommy Hilfiger sounds like. I said, no, this is too much. At that point, I was still a freshman. I said, this is too much. Sophomore year, my hair was still long for the first half of the year. A student was filming a movie at Clark Atlanta, and I was introduced to the student and asked if I wanted to act a role. Because if I put a suit on with my hair long, I looked like I could play the role of a contract killer, ironically, despite looking innocent. There was a sister that was playing the role of another one of the hit team that was responsible to kidnap and hold someone for ransom. My character's name was John. I was supposed to depict John as kind of cold, but calculating. I forgot her character's name, but she was the only actress in the whole script. And there's a line where I was supposed to say, I was supposed to remind us about a particular condition so that we did not make a mistake in our operation to hide the one we kidnap and hold for ransom. And when I say this, she gets mad and says, John, fuck the shuck up. And she's supposed to walk up and point her finger in my chest. Later, she asked if she could add a slap to it, but not a real physical slap against me, but rather with a camera angle to make it look like she hit me. The student whose project this was, and she decided that we could film that a few times and we could try it with and without the slap to see. But of course, she wasn't going to actually hit me. She began to, as we filmed it a few times, she began to get too into that. And the messed up thing about it was that the script called for her character to be irritated by my character all the time anyway. But this would be the first time where she blew up. It was too realistic for me. I said, well, that's kind of real life. I mean, you take a chick that feels confident in herself and we're around each other long enough, and this is what's going to happen. And the actress herself, not the character she played, but the actress was one of these neo soul, neo funk chicks. You know, this is the 90s and she's back to wearing bell bottoms with a miniature fro. But she dressed in costume for the role, of course. Smelling like garlic and onions, by the way. She one of them chicks. My instinct said to me, Black, she's going to hit you for real. So during the next filming of that specific scene, I said my line and she turned around and she said, "Fuck the shuck up, John." And she walked up and I tilted my head, not just to the side like I was being hit, but I moved it back right ahead of her hand. If I had not moved my head back, she would have actually hit me. She never apologized for that. We finished filming that day and I went to the barber that was living on my floor in the dorm, and I said to him, I'm ready for the haircut now. I think we finished filming. Because if they called me back and said we're going to shoot the scene again, I would have been glad to say, no, I've already gotten my haircut, because I had to start with my business classes the next semester anyway. So I got that cut, and I went ahead and I'm trying to remember where I drove. I don't remember if I drove to see my grandparents first. Right after that, if I drove straight to the Gulf Coast. I don't remember which one. But in any case, I remember that. And then a few months later, second semester that same year, some friends, we all went out. And the messed up thing was that as all of us were going out, one of the chicks was from Angola and the other one was from Namibia. And the chick from Namibia was fine visually to look. She was fine to look at visually. She struck me in the head at a club. She said she thought I was calling her the H word. She knew that I was singing along to the song and the H word was not in the lyrics. She just wanted to hit someone. She might as well have been an American chick. It gets worse. As time goes on, it just gets worse. I went through my junior year doing a lot of work. What I remember was, I think it was a summer after my junior year that there was an article in the newspaper for the AUC where one of the business students said that in Brazil, the African Brazilians actually liked nice guys, cariñosos, that they weren't looking for the thugs. And he said that African American women were going to mess up and start losing because it was not even feasible for brothers to keep chasing sisters. And my mom saw me reading the paper and I said, Mom, this guy's talking about something I've heard before. My mom said, well, that doesn't mean that y'all shouldn't go after black women. And I said, no, I don't know, but I do know this. If this is the problem for brothers across the board and the same guys do keep going for black women, they are never going to succeed. It goes for me too. We're getting to a point where it is actually stupid for us to do that. I think it might have been the summer after my sophomore year, though. I could be wrong. The next two girlfriends I had in college were both from my hometown. And that told me something. I eventually began to realize that I was only going to get the attention of women that lived too far away or that were just simply too far below me according to their own metrics. Forget mine. Far too much younger than I am, inappropriate age gaps. I said to a few friends of mine that I was beginning to notice this and that it may be stupid for me to even try when it comes to sisters. I'd already had to tell my parents summer after my freshman year that I was not going to approach sisters anymore. Now, what I meant was American sisters, but I wasn't necessarily going to make approaches to sisters from the continent or from other countries automatically, only because I wasn't sure how that worked. But there I could honestly say, well, the cultures could be, the culture could be a different set of rules. But when it comes down to American sisters, every approach is wrong. They're all wrong. It takes somebody else to make them know that I beat some dudes up in high school for them to see me in a different light. And that's too childish. And we were getting into the age where they don't really look at the fights you've had, but they still look at who else you've dated. We were getting to that age where they don't want you to have a clean slate. They start looking at you, because you have a clean slate, they start looking at you like, what the hell's wrong with you? Why do you have a clean, like, why don't you have a bunch of women in your history? I had to realize that's what it was. I knew this was going to be bad unless I stopped trying to talk to sisters. And I did years before, but I knew it was going to be bad unless I actually kept them out of my personal life, my personal space, not letting them know much about me at all. And this meant even the ones that were friends, I had to keep them in the dark. I knew that it was pretty much going to be either I was going to be alone, or I was going to be with someone that wasn't one of us. And like I told you, I grew up pro-Black, and I'd already learned that most other groups of people on the planet were enemies. As a matter of fact, I didn't know who weren't enemies by this point. I wasn't sure who was not an enemy to our people. Fast forwarding. I met this single mom at an Ethiopian church. This is before I became Muslim. We weren't trying to hit it off, become a couple. It wasn't that, but I met her because her son, a toddler, had run up to me. And I learned that she had divorced his dad. And she said she just couldn't respect him anymore. It wasn't like that in Ethiopia, but she said that once they got to Atlanta, she just could no longer respect him. And so instead of disrespecting him, she just left him, even though they had a son. I didn't understand fully what was going on, but I had a suspicion. Fast forward a few years after I've graduated. And this is what's happened. I was training a training class, and a guy named Daryl from Detroit was one of my students. He was married. He and his wife had moved to Atlanta. Both of them found jobs in Atlanta. Later, after he was no longer one of my trainees, about 8 months later, actually, he was working with a chick that I was beginning to dig named Yo-Yo. That's not her real name, it's her nickname. Her real name was more professional. She was 3 years older than I am. Is 3 years older. I'm sure she's still around. I went by one day, I saw Daryl on my way to tell her about a promotion I got. I was going to be at a different address. Saw Daryl. I said, Daryl, how things going, man? And Daryl told me his wife was tripping. He said she had a different attitude lately. I said, Daryl, I don't understand why this would happen, because y'all moved here to Atlanta where single men are rare. Is she trying to drive you away in a market like this? He said, that's why I'm telling you about this. I wanted to ask if this was normal. And I told him, well, I heard of a couple going through this. They moved here from another country, and she couldn't respect him anymore. Maybe because he didn't make enough money. I don't know, but I don't know much more than that, though. And then Abe said, I don't either, man. I don't get it. My heart went out to him. I went over the few cubicles away. I saw Yo-Yo for a bit, told her, look, I got the promotion. I'm going to be in another building altogether at a different part of town. Now, Yo-Yo was a trip. First time she stood me up, I said, that's it. First time, I said, that's it. I'm going to make her a psychological test dummy. to test out some theories I have about women. And I did that. I scheduled some more dates with her, knowing she was going to do the stand-up, but I let her prove it, and she did. And I learned a lot of things. But what I learned was some harsh lessons. I learned that pretty much educated, sophisticated women they didn't have more sense when it came to men than ignorant ghetto country chicks did. They did not have more sense. And not only that, they did not appreciate me more than the ghetto country chicks did. It was actually the reverse. They appreciated me less. And Yo-Yo's friend, Jan, actually told me, you light skinned and you got straight hair. Ain't nobody gonna really check for you on these sites like Black Planet where people were trying to match up. She said, if you go on one of them sites, ain't nobody gonna check for you except country chicks and ghetto chicks. She said it. She was right. So I had to stop and think, well, what is it about me? Because I mean, I could just put a profile up and this is what happens. So something's off. I can no longer say it's my game, it's my rap, because if I put a profile up, which I did as an experiment, because I never did like that long distance stuff. But if I would have put a profile up, then it was the same thing. So I figured, well, then it must mean I'm just not much to look at. And if that's what it is, then I need to know. And actually it was Jan that said, you don't have to be ugly. Rebecca broke it down more though. Rebecca broke it down later on, or maybe about the same time. She broke it down. It was that same job. That was where Rebecca straight told me, look, you're not going to be, wait a minute. Yeah, same place, same time. Rebecca was the one that broke it down a lot and said, you are not going to be treated the same. We are not going to do that anymore. You look like you do. It doesn't matter if you're cute. We're looking for something different. Now, Rebecca wasn't talking about herself. She was married. She was actually trying to let me know how these ladies were feeling so that I wouldn't continue. She was the one that said, you need to consider women of other races because sisters ain't going to treat you right. And that's the ones that like you. Shortly after that was 9/11, made me forget a lot of stuff. I played a few psychological experiments with Yo-Yo. Like I said, eventually Jan too. And then I became Muslim. I forgot all about them. Eventually, I got laid off from that job because I wouldn't let customers talk trash on the phone to me. But I didn't get fired because I was doing my job. I just wouldn't let them talk trash. So when they did layoffs, I was one of them. So the next thing I did was the next real permanent job that I got, permanent one, was 2005, actually. Right as my first daughter was born. I remembered going in, and there was a Wyatt chick named Crystal who had been a nanny before this office job. So she felt threatened by everybody else, or pretty much everybody else that worked around her was black. Management, of course, was white. But she started zeroing in on the brothers first, trying to get us to feel insecure in our jobs. And it was a black woman that formed a shield around us from their own white lady colleague and let us know what she was trying to do. Sisters, I remember them. Miss Wilkerson, Miss Washington, Sharon. I'm using whichever name is the most common amongst people in the United States. So if the last name is distinct, I'm using the first name. But I remember these sisters formed, and they pretty much put a wall, a block around me, around E, around Prince. Yeah, that's his name. His last name is even more unique, so they can't tell y'all that. Um, I remember I was giving sisters credit back then. I was talking to my wife and I said, black women look out for brothers. I'm seeing it at my job. I told her I want to do something nice for them sisters at the job. So I'm letting you know now if I get like some sweets or something for some of them, it's not because I'm flirting, it's because I'm thanking them. So I'm just letting you know now, sweetheart. That's what's up. She said, well, tell me more. And I told her the deal. And one day she wrote an email to me. My wife, while I was at work, wrote an email to me telling me off about my job situation and saying, you need to think about what you're doing that makes this crystal chick feel comfortable getting drunk after work and telling everybody that she can give you the box. Now, give me the box does not mean what it does now. It back then at that company, especially, it meant firing someone. She got drunk one Friday when they all went out to drink. I didn't, obviously, and told them she was talking sporty about everybody that didn't go out with them. And she was like, "Oh yeah, and Kathy gave me authority to give black the box at any point." And I was like, and so Prince came back, told me, and some of the sisters came back and told me on Monday when we went back to work, and I straight said, damn, I really appreciate y'all telling me. And I kept the distance from Crystal. I went, did my job, ducked as much as I could. But when I explained to my wife that they were looking out for me, then my wife later blamed me. She blamed me, and I had to go back and explain to my wife, you didn't pay attention to what the hell I told you. This chick is trying to do this to the brothers in general. She just let it spill in front of them that she could do this to me because I wasn't there. If E hadn't been there, she would have said black and E. Understand? Watch your mouth. By this point, I had married, and I didn't realize that a Muslima was not really much better trained. Two years later, I went to grad school, and it was opposite. It was a white lesbian professor. I don't actually know if she's into other women, but she was my professor when I was in the grad school to go back in for education. This time I was going to teach. When I went into student teaching, my first semester was at a middle school with a brother that was teaching. Things were smooth. And then my second semester, I was at a high school with a sister that was teaching history, and it wasn't smooth anymore. She had me go to her house, and we sat in her living room and we did lesson plans. And I turned them in, and the principal did not like them. And he said to her, teach him how to do lesson plans. And she said, I don't even know why you did them that way, forgetting that I did them in her living room with her. I can't make that up. I don't remember her name, so I couldn't tell you. Her assistant for the special ed students also told my professor, along with her, that I wasn't doing my job as a student teacher. The professor from the university listened to them, and I came around the corner, and she said, you might want to stay for this black. And they kept talking, and they said it in front of me too. Then she said to them, I'm going to sort this out. She and I went to the library and she said, listen, Black, that's what they said before you got here. And this is what they said after you got here. I doubt that it's really like they say. I got doubts about that. I'm going to tell you, though, I'm coming back to watch and see for myself. I'm going to find out. You're neither off the hook nor in trouble until I come and see for myself. It'll be this week. Well, matter of fact, I'll even let you pick the time. I said, well, if I pick the time, of course, that might be an unfair advantage. But I'll just tell you when it is that I don't have lessons to teach so that you can come at one of the times I do. So I told her when I didn't. She showed up when I expected her to, though. And what she saw was me in the room by myself teaching the special ed students with whom I was not supposed to be left alone in the first place. That meant that the special education assistant teacher was not on her job. The main teacher was not in the room either. That means she was not on her job. And I didn't know about all of this. So when she was done evaluating my lesson, she pulled me back into the library and said to me, listen, Black, what you're facing is something I've seen before. Both of them are single moms and single grandmoms. They come across two kinds of Black males only. Those who don't know anything, like the special ed students, and they always talk. And then those who know a lot, like the valedictorian of that class, Carl, and they're quiet. That's what they see. You are smart and you must talk a lot because this is your job. You're training for it. They don't understand that much either, even though you're a student teacher. They're not making an exception for you because they got something against Black men. She said to me, it's not always the white man that wants to emasculate you, Black. You get these bitter single mothers and they will do it too. And it snapped. This Wyatt woman who may have been into other women was sitting up telling me this, and I did not have a leg to stand on to debate and try to defend sisters because I was seeing it with my own eyes again. Later on, the summer of that year, I remember visiting my hometown for a little bit and talking to my pops about the evaluation that I got versus the evaluation from my professor. I said, Pop, I'm trying to understand something. The professor told me about a particular phenomenon. I might have seen it. My dad actually said, do you think you might have been imagining this? Now my dad is red pill aware. He gets it now. It's my mother that got him red pill aware, and his sister, my aunt. Wasn't me. My experience with the job before I went to grad school was the last time I experienced sisters getting brothers' backs. It was the last time I experienced that. Later on, I didn't see that anymore. When I finished finally finished the grad school, and then I got a job actually as a teacher, and got it in the private school. I mean, I went to a substitute job for a while, and then I got a private school job at a Muslim school, actually. There were plenty of them popping up in the Atlanta area by that point. So I got a job in one of them. And I saw how broken the educational system was, even at the Muslim schools. So that was over. Subsequently, I got a job doing something not related to education, which is funny because that's also when I got my actual teaching certificate. And be honest with you, I began to become red pill aware at that job. I'd be listening to YouTube when I would be on the highways riding. It's part of my work. But it was the white manosphere. And I wasn't working in Atlanta or in my hometown anymore. But then it got worse. I got laid off from that job because they realized that not only that I was black, but that I was also Muslim, and I wasn't going to let them tell their N-word jokes and not fire back. The friend of mine that got me the job was also let go, and then the friend of his that got the information from the inside as to why we were let go, the real reasons, was also let go. So they were getting rid of N-words and N-word lovers at this job. This is after Obama won his re-election. So they were retaliating. So then I taught for a while. After that, after I lost that job, I went back to my hometown. And what I saw was that there was one sister that really did look out for me at the new job. I taught in my hometown in the public school. And when I went in to be interviewed for the position, I didn't even know it was going to be an interview when I was interviewed by a panel of sisters, but they were supportive. And there was one that worked with me closely during that job and had my back and everything. And I really did appreciate that. So in my hometown, things were still kind of what they would have been expected to be as I remember them. And I even, and I thanked them when it was over. I said, look, I really do appreciate y'all looking out for me, especially the one that really helped me out. But she had some of that masculine energy. Yeah, she did. But then again, when you're teaching a bunch of bad behind students on the Gulf Coast that fight every time it's Friday or there's a holiday coming up or you have a half day at school, whatever. Yeah, I guess she had to develop some of that. She told me, if you stay at this job long enough, you're going to take blood pressure medicine. You have to. She said that. But looking back, they also did that because they didn't want me to just bail on them early. That was the other reason that they were doing that. But and I don't think they'd been hearing about as much feminism as you would have heard in Atlanta. But by this point, I had realized how bad Atlanta had gotten. You see, in Atlanta, the sisters had a leg up from the beginning, and we brothers weren't upset about that. We looked and said, black women deserve that. Brothers and sisters alike were coming in from New Jersey, New York, California, mostly New Jersey and New York, though, Delaware, a few from Connecticut, Pennsylvania, these areas, mostly from there. And as they were coming in, sisters were coming in with a plan. They were going to stay with someone they know. They had some kind of license or credentials. They knew that they had full reciprocity between their home state and Georgia with whatever license they had. And they were going to be allowed to save up a little money and get off to a pretty good start. But the other thing, too, was that sisters were in HR, so they were helping each other out, too. They certainly weren't holding each other back. Brothers were going, but brothers were going without as much of a plan. A lot of brothers were just like, I'm just going to go. And then they would just get in the car, get on the bus or something, get out the car, get out the bus in Atlanta, like where I sign up at. As I thought, that's what I thought was the case. Come to find out later on, what was really going on is that when you get into these HR positions and you interview, sisters ain't looking out for you. Few of them did, but a lot of them weren't. I found it out later on because other brothers began to tell me this. They had begun to tell me this about 2009, 2010, and that was when something else happened. They started telling me this even more when I got that one good job where I wasn't working in Atlanta or in my hometown. I was working in the Midwest. That's when I started to hear more of these stories. And more brothers were starting to say, man, Atlanta ain't got nothing in it for us no more. Cat named Adam, I know. He was from Detroit. He left Atlanta, moved out to Phoenix. Another brother from Detroit, Muslim man. Left Atlanta, went out to Phoenix for a while. He saw how it could get better. And the two of them didn't meet each other. Now they know some of the same people, but they never met each other. One's Muslim, one's Christian. Well, no, one's Muslim, the other one's not religious at all. Atlanta was teaching brothers to be pro-black woman, but it wasn't teaching black women to be pro-black man or pro-black, really, just pro-black woman. Something else I began to see was that because of the way that brothers, I thought it was the way that brothers were going into Atlanta, but I found out later it was different. Because of the way that white men and sisters in HR were kind of conspiring to keep brothers back, which is not only in Atlanta, unless you were 9AY. A lot of brothers were winding up on hard times, and so they were at the masjid or at the church or at the corner begging. That's where they were. So I'd be riding around doing my deliveries, and there'd be some bruh at the corner at the light begging. It was always like that. And I just got sick and tired of being begged all the time because I didn't have it. Don't have it, but I'm under pressure to give. And I ain't got it. So I began to wonder why it was that I wasn't seeing sisters out there begging. They were buying homes and stuff, but I'm seeing brothers out there begging. And I assumed also that it was based on how some of these brothers were going out there. But what I began to realize was that a lot of the brothers were mentally ill. And they were from Atlanta. And then there were those that came in from somewhere else. And a common story I began to hear was, I came down here for a job, but they didn't hire me when they never started me on a job when I actually got here. They told me sit at home and wait a few days, and they never called back. When I called them up, they got somebody else for the job. That was a common thing I began to hear. Now, honestly, beggars have a lot of stories. But this one seemed to spread pretty quickly. And these brothers, the difference between the guys telling this story and the other brothers is that they really seemed surprised and like they still didn't understand. They still didn't understand why. I told you all about how Daryl and his wife fell on hard times. Well, his wife was tripping. Told y'all about that. An Ethiopian lady who straight said she couldn't respect her husband no more, so she left him. I'm going to tell you what else I saw. I also saw more Ethiopian couples start to split apart. Then I began, as after I'd become Muslim a while, I began to see other couples, Muslim couples from different parts of the world split. A Yemeni couple. I met them just after they divorced. a Sudanese couple. Another one was about to divorce because they were coming up on hard times. They couldn't even pay for their daughter's tuition, and the secretary of the school was scared to ask them because he knew that they were just on hard times. Just kept getting worse. Kept on getting worse. Sudanese brother that wound up being left by his wife. One day I saw him with a tooth missing. Reason his tooth was missing was because his now ex-wife had lied to another woman and her husband about how he'd been mistreating her and the kids. And this other man was enraged by this, and he went and fought this guy from Sudan and knocked out his tooth. The cat from Sudan said, my ex-wife don't even realize what she did. She lied to someone else. I lost a tooth and she ain't even said sorry. Instead, she wants to use that to get custody of the kids, complete custody, while I get stuck with child support. She's taking my kids away. He later gave up and moved to North Carolina to work a good job, he found. He said there's no blessing for us anymore in Atlanta. It was the last time I saw him. He said to me, God took the blessing away from Atlanta. And at that time, I thought that Atlanta was worse. I don't know how much worse than the rest of the country Atlanta is now, but what I can say is that at that point, Atlanta was like a broadcasting station for a whole lot of evil. I can say that looking back. I've since then been listening to what's been going on, and people have been saying the same things about other cities recently. They said that in Baltimore, you can't get a job as a straight black male. You might have to pretend you 9AY. That was Atlanta back in the 2010s. Some people have said that if you're a black man and you go to get interviewed for a job and it's a sister in HR, you ain't going to get that job. You will not get a call back unless it's a really crap job and you're overqualified for it. Then they'll call you first, like they know what they're doing. And I've seen that happen. But now they're saying that this ain't just Atlanta no more. They're saying that in other cities in general, they're not limiting this to Atlanta anymore. They're saying you're a black man, you start a job, and they're like, well, you need to learn to be a little bit more submissive and let people tell you what to do. That sisters are telling brothers on jobs this. That's Atlanta. I was thinking of making this a series, but I figured it might as well go and knock it out in one fell swoop. I want you all to understand, though, I'm not telling you all this to tell everybody run away from Atlanta. I'm telling you this because I want you all to understand that if it has not reached where you are now, it's coming. That's what I wanted you guys to realize. I'm sorry that I can't tell you that every one of us is going to be able to make it out of the United States right now, anytime soon. I wish I could say that, but I know I can't. I can only tell you to prepare if you're not able to get out. I don't think it's going to go all to hell in a handbasket overnight. I don't think so, but I can only tell you that you want to make your life as simple as it possibly can be. And you got to prepare to stay alone for long stretches at a time. And I can also tell y'all that, unfortunately, the bad news that I didn't think was really this bad a week ago. Well, over a week ago. But bad news is that Thailand might be ruined. It might be over. If you listen to that clip that I posted from International Passport, shout out to him. There's something to be said for how these sisters have been going to Bali and acting a mother cuss word fool. You got quite a few women that were into women, sisters, so to speak, that were into women in Bali getting in trouble for different things. And guess what? The last time they picked up two of them for making a scene and trash and stuff in Bali, they were picked up as they tried to board a flight to go to Thailand. Why? And the last one, that bald-headed one is not even into men, went and acted a plumb fool, trashed property because the ones that were helping her asked her to pay rent. What purpose does all of this serve? What did she expect? In order for her to pay rent, somebody must have cut a deal with her and said, listen, if you act a fool and make it look bad for the brothers that's out there, we'll send you some dough. But you got to take a risk. They're acting as if someone is paying them to act up. And since they found that Indonesia is going to crack down right off the bat, they figured, well, you can do a little bit more in Thailand before they come after you. So go do it there. I'm telling you, gentlemen, there's always a paid effort to do anything that is against the interest of us. In Jamaica, they softened the stance towards that booty bandit business. They don't like it per se, but they somewhat softened the stance a little bit. What is the reason? Well, because of advocacy. What's the reason they did that? Because Jamaica is a place where even though you got these two strong black women, you still got some generally strong black men, strong personality having black men. That's why. That's the reason. You have, if you're a brother and you're sick of being emasculated in the States, in the 2000s, you could have gone to Jamaica. If you found a way to work and make a living there, you could have gone to Jamaica in the 2000s. So they changed it. The continent would have been the next place. You could have gone to the continent if you were sick of the emasculation of black men, and they're trying to change that. But they're paid efforts. There are always paid efforts when it comes to this. And so now you got sisters looking not so much to tell brothers that they need to be like women or accept that sort of lifestyle per se, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to blow up a particular spot. Now, I think it's already probably been ruined because of the pay for play and the stuff I told y'all before, but they seem to be trying to ruin it, not just Pattaya, which is ruined. They seem to be trying to ruin things for bros in the kingdom of Thailand. What they want to do is show that they can remove options. Already enough of us can't just up and leave the States. But they want to make sure that there are no destinations too. In addition to the fact that most brothers are not going to be able to just up and go overnight, they still want to turn around and ruin destination options. And they probably succeeded. Medellin, anybody? Sosua? And that's why I've been saying, brothers, you're going to have to go the conservative route and male chastity, because one thing that made all of this possible in Atlanta was that men were still trying to smash, despite the feminism, despite the nasty, filthy, stank, funky attitudes, despite how game goofy these broads have been, despite how flighty, how immature, how bat boo-boo crazy and insane them broads got in Atlanta, bros were still trying to smash. We made it too easy. And so they broadcasted this around the States. And then when we decided to go, now what are they doing? They're going to areas and they're ruining it. But the thing is that they're teaching the local women one way or another. You must not go trying to smash, at least not trying to fornicate. And if you're married and you still got to try, divorce her, no matter what her origin is. until you no longer chase the crotch without a contract. They're going to have power. This is why they flip out when you tell them no, when you reject them, and when you don't even approach them. If they don't have the ability to say no, they flip the up out, because that's where all their power is. They gauge everything else by that. Think about it. Once they're in a position to say yes or no, then they start plotting and planning. All plots are ruined when you don't even put them in a position to answer. They will go to the gym and try to get attention so they can say no. Don't approach them. Don't try. They will be walking down the street, passing you by, and just say no. And you'll be wondering, what are these bras sitting up saying no for? If they can't say no to answer a question, they'll just say it, because that's how desperate they are, because everything else revolves around that. Once they can't say anything because you're not asking any questions, you're not making any invitations, once that happens, they don't know what to do. Stop trying to smash, no matter what the race is. You keep this up, and the Philippines will also become ruined. Believe me, they'll go there next if they can. Already as it is, the Muslims of the West are trying to ruin the Muslims of traditional societies. They're not going into the southern Philippines yet. They will, but they're not going yet. They're not going into southern Thailand yet, because not many of us are there. They're trying it in Kuala Lumpur. I already know about that. They're trying it in southern Nigeria and in Abuja too, because you got Muslims there. That's what I wanted you all to understand. All of this that I've been telling you about Atlanta is so that you realize that when you like certain places and you are trying to get some trim, they already have a plan. And that is to shuck fit up everything. Now, if you're going and you're only looking to marry, at least according to your faith tradition, to marry, even if you're going to marry 2 or 3 or 4, if you're going to do at least that, they're still going to try to mess things up. But it is harder to mess up marriages that involve traditional women than it is to mess up fornication spots or to mess up marriages involving feminist women. It is harder to do that. If a woman really, really, really wants to insult you, what does she do to really make you jealous? She doesn't just flirt with another dude, she smashes another dude. If you want to make a chick jealous, you marry someone better. Then you smash. Because I'm telling you, the goal is to turn the world into Atlanta. I hope that what I've said is a benefit. Thanks for listening all this long stretch of time. Thanks for your patience. As always, black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, black heterosexual, non-select male power because they don't like it. Black patriarchy until extinction of judgment day. Thank you for flying with us again here at Jet Black Airways, where Jet Black's also a verb. Keep Jet Black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off this feather mucker. Gender, justice, forever.